Hello class and welcome to a new analysis, this time of Reasons for Attendance by Philip Larkin. This poem shows Larkin standing outside a dance hall, watching young couples dance and asking himself why he chooses solitude and art over the shared pleasures of company. Its main themes are self-deception, happiness as social performance, and art and individuality. This poem comes from Larkin's 1955 collection, The Less Deceived, although it was written 2 years prior in 1953. Before the poem itself, look at the title, Reasons for Attendance. Here the diction announces that this poem will be an argument, an exercise in justification. Reasons is an abstract noun belonging to the vocabulary of logic and debate. This title promises us a speaker who will defend his choices like a case in court. Now that we've dwelled on the title, let's move on to the first stanza. I'll leave you a moment to pause the video and read it for yourself in order to form your own opinion before I start the analysis. So in this stanza, the speaker is drawn by trumpet music to a lit window where he watches young dancers moving with strange seriousness to the beat. The stanza opens with personification. The trumpet has a voice. It does not merely play music, it seems to call, to command, or to summon the speaker. The word authoritative suggests that the music has social power. It is enthralling and compelling. And so from the very first line, a sound calls the speaker. And this prepares us for the second, more important call of the bell later in the poem, and more specifically in stanza 3. The poem is structured around these two competing calls. But let's go back to the diction loud and authoritative. These adjectives make pleasure sound domineering rather than joyful. This trumpet is a public pressure that draws the speaker against his own stillness. We already have this theme of the individual versus the crowd, and the social performance one must take on when being in public. In the social world, humans are commanded by society's pressures. Then the lighted glass is a powerful piece of symbolism. The window here, or the lighted glass, is a threshold. The speaker can see the dancer's world, but he is sealed off from it by a transparent barrier. The glass lets him observe without participating. We also have this contrast between light and darkness, the bright communal world inside and the solitary watcher in the dark outside. Then the phrase all under 25 is separated. It is set off from the rest of the line as an apostrophe. It is an interruption that reads as a muttered aside. The observer is taking notes as he watches. And so age here is clearly a dividing line between the speaker and the dancers. The dancers belong to a category that the speaker no longer belongs to. And we can really infer this through the apostrophe. The stanza then closes on the antithesis of solemnly on the beat of happiness. Solemnity belongs to ritual and duty, not joy. It makes the dancing feel mechanical, forced, ceremonial, and constrained. This contrasts with happiness, which is meant to be spontaneous, free, and fun. The dancers, therefore, seem to be performing happiness in a serious and almost dutiful way. And on that note, let's move on to stanza 2. I'll leave you, as always, a moment to read the stanza and form your own opinion before I begin the analysis. So in this stanza, the speaker admits he is only imagining the pleasures inside. And then he interrogates himself with a chain of questions about why anyone is on either side of the glass. And so this is where the title of the poem becomes meaningful. Larkin is wondering the reasons of attendance. The stanza opens quite irregularly with a sign of punctuation from the get-go. The dash here physically breaks the flow of the poem and turns against everything stanza 1 just claimed. It therefore signals a shift, an upheaval in the speaker's thinking. This shift, foreshadowed by the dash, is confirmed by the volta, introduced by the conjunction or. With "or so I fancy," the speaker confesses that the scene he described was imagined. This is the first crack in the speaker's reliability, and it feeds directly into the theme of self-deception. On a side note, self-deception is one of the main themes of this poem, so keep this passage in mind. So to summarize, this entire scene was deduced by Larkin, who sensed the smoke and sweat, the wonderful feel of girls. So as you have heard, we have an alliteration here, a sibilant alliteration. The hissing S sound suggests heat, movement, and sensuality. It evokes the whisper and the rustle of the crowded room. Notice that the speaker imagines these textures with real relish. He is savoring what he is seeing and sensing. He is excited. Although he is outside patiently waiting, we can sense that he feels a sort of envy for the men and women, the dancers, on the inside of this dance hall. And this sibilance makes this scene all the more appealing to the speaker. And this attraction becomes totally explicit in the diction of the wonderful feel of girls. The speaker is clearly attracted to the sexual energy of the scene. And whereas wonderful is a warm adjective, feel is bluntly physical. For one moment, the observer's mask slips, and the reader realizes the speaker's desire for the first time. However, the speaker will desperately try to hide this desire, this envy, in the latter stages of the poem. The stanza then pivots on the rhetorical question, why be out there? This rhetorical question really expresses the speaker's moment of temptation and self-doubt. He wonders why he is staying outside when the dance hall offers warmth, desire, and social pleasure. He then follows up immediately with a second rhetorical question, which forms a parallelism. He first asks, why be out there, but then responds, why be in there? The parallelism between the two rhetorical questions create a balanced back and forth that shows the speaker's indecision and indicates a mind arguing with itself. Larkin suggests that neither outside nor inside feels fully satisfying. So the speaker is trapped between detachment and participation. So this is the debate that the title promised us. Is there a good enough reason for attendance? We do, though, get the sense that the speaker is trying to convince himself that he does not want to be there. He is trying to suppress his own desire and his own envy of these people. And going back on the questions, notice the deixis, out there and in there. These small pointing words fix the speaker's position in space. He is on the outside of the glass, and the entire argument of the poem unfolds from that vantage point. The interrogation then intensifies with the diacope, sex, yes, but what is sex? So here Larkin imagines sex as a possible motive for this party, for this dance hall. However, through this diacope, he immediately undermines this motive right after having announced it. The speaker here is searching for a reason for attendance, but even the most obvious one cannot survive his questioning. Larkin then makes an allusion with the lion's share. The lion's share is an idiom that alludes to Aesop's fable, in which the lion claims everything for himself. We therefore use the idiom lion's share to denote the largest or best portion of a divided resource. And so in this sentence, Larkin is really wondering whether the happiness in the world is truly found predominantly by and through couples. Are couples the source of happiness for all? Well, he leaves this question unanswered through the cross stanza enjambment, which builds anticipation for the end of the sentence. But then in stanza 3, Larkin establishes that no, happiness doesn't exclusively come from couples. That is completely inaccurate. And with that segue to the third stanza, please pause the video and read it for yourself before I begin the analysis. So in this stanza, the speaker names what truly calls him the bell of art, and claims that it confirms his individuality, while conceding that others may hear it too. Well, the stanza opens by landing on the diction of inaccuracy, completing the enjambment from stanza 2. The word represents the final judgment of the speaker on the idea that couples hold the main share of happiness. That is totally inaccurate. And once again, we can sense some sort of jealousy coming from Larkin here. He refuses to believe that he, who is alone, has no access to this happiness. Notice, though, the small detail that follows. As far as I'm concerned, the speaker quietly admits that this is only his opinion, and that most people do not believe that. Well, so if it isn't romantic and couple life that makes Larkin happy, then what is it? Well, he answers this with the word what. So here, this declarative syntax contrasts with the previous uncertainty of the rhetorical questions and sounds certain and direct. After a stanza of questions, the speaker firmly establishes what attracts and appeals him art. And art calls him through the sound of a bell, as mentioned before. Once again, the bell is personified, as it has a rough tongue. This bell is rough-tongued. Larkin refuses to make art and art's call beautiful. Art is austere, unpolished, and even harsh. Choosing it means choosing difficulty over pleasure, even though that difficulty in the end is superior and more respectable. Or at least that's the opinion of Larkin and the sort of justification that he is making for choosing art over social relationships. Well, then comes the parenthesis where Larkin confirms that this bell is the call for art. Just as the speaker names the grandest idea in the poem, he wraps it, he envelops it in parentheses. Art is supposed to be his vocation, his motive to live, yet he puts it in parentheses. Well, this is typical Larkin undercutting. He always tries to avoid pomposity, but it might also suggest his embarrassment. He cannot fully commit even to his own belief in art. We can sense that he is humiliated to have to watch all these couples enjoying themselves whilst he keeps true to his so-called vocation of art, which might just be a complete fabrication and a justification of his solitude. Then we have the diction insists. Art does not whisper or suggest, it insists. This is a verb of force, echoing the trumpet's authority from the opening line. As mentioned before, there are two main contrasting voices in this poem. The voice of the trumpet indicating pleasure, and the voice of the bell, symbolizing art. And these two voices act as voices in Larkin's head, urging him to choose a vocation, to choose a future. Does he prefer solitude, art, contemplation, loneliness, or does he prefer social pleasure and spending time with others and romantic partners? And Larkin's self-deception continues here as he is trying to justify art. Through the diacope of individual, Larkin is trying to hammer home that art is something that confirms his individuality. It sets him apart from the crowd inside the hall. Whilst the dancers in the dance hall are preoccupied about futile and useless things such as forming relationships and finding love, Larkin, no, he has a superior vocation, which is art. Art that reinforces his own individuality, that distinguishes him, that sets him apart, and that is a superior vocation. He then ends the third stanza with a modal verb in may. He admits that other people may also hear this call as well. This call, hearing this bell, therefore no longer makes him special. The claim to uniqueness starts to crumble at the very moment it is made. Let's now move on to the fourth and final stanza. Please pause the video, read it for yourself, and form your own opinion before I begin my personal analysis. In this stanza, the speaker constructs his final conclusion, his final settlement. He stays outside with art while the dancers stay inside with each other, and both are satisfied. So the stanza opens with parallelism. But not for me, nor I for them. Well, this alludes to the final lines of stanza 3, where Larkin had said that others may also hear this bell. The parallelism here really creates a balanced but divided structure. It reinforces the speaker's belief that his feelings and the dancer's feelings do not overlap. The speaker believes that his own sense of fulfillment is private and cannot be shared. And the dancers also have their own source, their own sense of elation and felicity. The diction of "with happiness" extends this separation. Both the speaker and the dancers find happiness, for they are pursuing different kinds of fulfillment. The dancers find happiness in youth and physical connection, while the speaker finds it in art, solitude, and self-definition. So this line could just be the end of the poem. Each group, each party has found their own source of happiness. And then Larkin employs the connective therefore. This gives Larkin's decision sort of a logical and almost argumentative quality, as if staying outside is the result of a reasoned conclusion rather than a feeling. Once again, we have this self-deception permeating the poem so much. It is clear that Larkin is jealous of these people inside, but is trying his best to make a compelling argument in order to justify his own loneliness. We then have an instance of anaphora in believing this and believing that. So this once again reinforces the idea that each side has its own reason for attending or not attending, and the two worlds coexist in apparent cohesion. However, we do get this sense once more of contempt and especially jealousy in the diction maul, which is a zoomorphism. To maul is to attack or injure someone using one's claws and teeth. So the dancers are likened to predators, to animals. Larkin is basically saying that this dance is bestial, animalistic, and he sort of has scorn and disdain for these people for pursuing such carnal and simple desires, whilst he admires art, which is a far superior version of happiness. That is what Larkin is trying to suggest. But obviously this is a coping mechanism. This is a way for him to deceive himself in order to justify his own parasocial behavior. But then, Larkin finally reveals that all this, all his whole preference for art might just be a complete lie. He says that both parties will be content if, so he uses a conditional, if no one has misjudged himself or lied. Their separate forms of happiness only work if neither side has misunderstood his own motives or pretended to be happier than he really is. Does that ring a bell? Well, it does, because that is what Larkin is totally doing. He is trying to justify himself for being alone. And this final line is a direct indication of that. The poem's last word invites us to reread everything the speaker has argued, the bell, the individuality, the reasons of the title, as a possible act of self-deception. Now that we've extensively analyzed and interpreted the whole poem, let's sort of look at the bigger picture through rhythm, structure, and form. Well, so first of all, in terms of structure, the poem's most striking feature is the repeated use of enjambment, most notably in the enjambment across the stanza break, where sheer falls into inaccuracy. In terms of form, the poem consists of 4 regular 5-line stanzas, called cinquains, whose tidy and rational shape makes the speaker's wish to appear logical even more obvious. And this poem really reads as a first-person meditation with the flavor of dramatic monologue. It is a single voice justifying itself to a silent audience. In terms of rhythm, the poem runs on a loosely iambic pentameter, but it is constantly disrupted. There are heavy caesurae created by dashes, brackets, semicolons, and midline full stops. In terms of rhyme, it wavers between full rhyme, such as bell, well, so, fro, satisfied, lied, and half rhyme with glass, face, sweat, what. And this contrast really mirrors the speaker's wavering between certainty and doubt. And now for a brief conclusion, we can really sum up this poem into 3 main themes. The first is self-deception, which is central to the poem. Both the speaker and the dancers may be using their chosen version of happiness to hide uncomfortable truths. The speaker presents his detachment as a rational decision, using connectives such as therefore I stay outside. But the final uncertainty in the phrase or lied suggests he may be disguising his loneliness or fear behind his logic. At the same time, the dancer's cheerful confidence may also be a performance or an act which masks their insecurity. The second theme is happiness as a social performance. Well, as mentioned in the first theme, the dancers pursue happiness solemnly, as if it were a duty. They treat pleasure like a ritual to be observed rather than to be enjoyed. And in the end, Larkin writes that both parties are satisfied, not ecstatic, not happy, but satisfied. This happiness, therefore, is not certain and it is not lasting. And the final theme is art and individuality. The speaker sees himself as standing out from the common folk. He is sensitive to art. He can appreciate it. But in reality, that might just be a self-deception in order to hide his own loneliness. He admits that multiple people hear this call of the bell, urging them to pursue art, but he is the only one who actually took it. He exposes how fragile his own uniqueness is. And on that note, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, comment, anything helps, and I'll see you in the next analysis. Have a nice one.